Next week, voters will turn out for the Michigan primaries, among other states. And on the Democratic side, it will feature one of the most watched races of the cycle. Because of redistricting, two incumbents, Andy Levin and Haley Stevens, are facing off against each other, which happens from time to time. They got districted into the same district. Now, what's fascinating here is that Levin is from arguably one of the best well-known Democratic families in all of Michigan. His uncle was the late six-term Senator Carl Levin. His father, former Congressman Sander Levin. Sander Levin represented part of the Detroit metro area for more than 3 decades. Now, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, known as AIPAC, is spending an enormous amount of money through a sort of soft money super PAC against Levin, who also happens to be one of only 27 Jewish members in the House. AIPAC has spent more than $3 million supporting Congressman Levin's opponent in a race where the two candidates combined have raised just over $7 million. So this is a huge, huge, huge thumb on the scale in that race. Last night, Levin spoke to my colleague, Mehdi Hassan, about why a top Israel lobby group is going after him.
You are Jewish. Why is a pro-Israel lobby group using a super PAC and dark money to try and defeat you in a Democratic primary?
I'm not just Jewish, Mehdi. I'm one of 2 former synagogue presidents in the Congress, along with Senator Jackie Rosen. I've got I've got mezuzot on all my doors. I'm really Jewish, but AIPAC can't stand the idea that I am the clearest, strongest Jewish voice in Congress, standing for a simple proposition that there's no way to have a secure democratic homeland for the Jewish people unless we achieve the political and human rights of the Palestinian people.
This, all that ad money seems to be paying off. New poll has Congressman Levin, again, an incumbent, well-known, down in the polls by 27 points with just over a week until the election. Peter Beiner is the editor-at-large for Jewish Currents, where he writes, quote, what AIPAC and its allies have recognized is not just the power of immense campaign spending, but the power of immense campaign spending in open Democratic congressional primaries. And he joins me now. Peter, what's going on here?
I think what happened is that in 2019, a group of members of Congress, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, came in who represented a shift in Democratic public opinion. The polling is very clear. Younger Democrats are much more sympathetic to Palestinian rights than older Democrats, and the Democratic Party in Congress is out of touch with where actual Democrats now are on the issue. And so AIPAC saw a danger that actually the Democrats in Congress might start to represent what most Democrats out there in the country believe, which is that the U.S. should not give unconditional military aid to Israel, irrespective of what it does, even if it demolishes people's homes and detains Palestinian children. And so AIPAC decided only a massive infusion of money into Democratic primaries would keep the Democrats in Congress not being receptive to the public opinion of actual Democrats in the country.
So I just want to be clear, it's not just this race, right? So Andy Levin and Haley Stevens, it's been a bunch of races, most recently Donna Edwards, who was running in Maryland. And here you've got this, you know, the United Democracy Project, which I guess is the sort of super PAC entity. I mean, the amount of money they're spending, like $4.26 million opposing Donna Edwards. There was 3.7 of all other outside spending in that primary. So like, this isn't just playing in races. They come in and they are, in many of the races, the single biggest source of ad money and ad spending in that race. And it has a pretty big effect, it looks like.
A massive effect. I mean, I think in the Maryland race, both Donna Edwards and her opponent directly spent less than $1 million. AIPAC spent almost $6 million. So, you know, that has a big impact in a House race. And it's not just AIPAC. What you're seeing in some of these races is that when AIPAC goes after a progressive candidate because they have some sympathy for Palestinian human rights, then you tend to see other groups that also don't like progressives, not because of Israel-Palestine, but because they think they might be too tough on the fossil fuel industry or the healthcare industry, and they pour in their money as well. And so what you have is essentially the creation of a whole new generation of Joe Manchins and Kirsten Sinemas in the Democratic caucus.
Now, you know, obviously this is the way that politics works now, post-Citizens United. There's unlimited spending from super PACs, and the Constitution, as read by the conservative court, is that this is part of the First Amendment. What's also striking to me here, there's a New York Times piece on this, which I thought was pretty good, but the headline was Democratic primaries are embroiled in debate over support for Israel. I thought that sort of misstated things, because the thing that's so bizarre here is, at least in the races that I've covered, Jessica Ramos' race and Henry Cuellar down in Texas, the vast majority of the spending hasn't been anything about Israel or Palestine or anything. It's not like they're coming in and saying, look, Andy Levin is critical of Israel. Haley Stevens is a more stalwart ally. Vote for Haley Stevens. They generally don't even mention Israel.
Right. They don't actually want to have a debate about Israel-Palestine, partly because it's not what most people are voting on, but also because the public opinion is very clear that AIPAC's view, which is that essentially no matter what Israel does, the U.S. will give it a blank check, is a very unpopular view among Democrats. So what they do is they find some generic poll-tested issue, and then they just basically buy up all the advertising to try to destroy the person on that issue. But it's fundamentally because they don't want an open debate about Israel-Palestine, because they know that actually AIPAC is not where most Democrats in the country are on that issue.
Yeah, I misspoke. It's Jessica Cisneros, not Ramos, down in the Rio Grande Valley, who lost that very closely contested primary. What do you think? I mean, where's the money coming from? Is the other question, right? So, I mean, you've got huge. I mean, there's a huge checks being written. Some of it gets disclosed later on, but my sense is that, ironically enough, in these races where they'll run ads saying so-and-so is not a real Democrat, right? The super PAC will run an ad. Like, the money is coming often from people that themselves are not Democrats.
Yes, some of the biggest donors, people who've written million-dollar checks, are Republicans. And in fact, they lead Republican institutions. The head of the Manhattan Institute, which is a very prominent kind of right-leaning think tank, which basically supports a very conservative agenda, gave AIPAC Super PAC $1 million, for instance. And so, right, I mean, AIPAC does not care whether Democrats or Republicans win. They simply want people who will support Israel unconditionally to win. But those people, by and large, are also less likely to take a progressive stance on other issues, because if you don't basically believe in the idea of equality under the law for Palestinians, you're less likely to actually believe it in the United States either.
All right, Peter Beinart, who's got a piece about this in Jewish Currents, and this continues to be the case. We'll watch that Andy Levin, Haley Stevens primary and others where this will likely play out as well. Thanks a lot.